Is it possible that a single sentence spoken in a calm tone without provocation, without any ambition to shake things up, could instead turn into the spark for the most sensitive question in the global K-pop industry today? Is this about BTS? Or is it actually about Jungkook? That question did not emerge from empty space, was not born from rumors, and was not shaped by wild speculation. It was born in the most official, most respected, and most closely watched place on the South Korean music calendar, the stage of the 40th Golden Disc Awards. An event that should have been a celebration of achievement instead became the starting point of a long discussion about representation, symbols, and how the public reads meaning behind words that appear simple on the surface. The 40th edition of the Golden Disc Awards was held with a grandeur that marked the long history of the K-pop industry. Amid the spotlight, the magnificent stage design, and the aura of legitimacy attached to this ceremony, there was a special segment titled Universal Language. From the beginning, this segment was designed to discuss music as a language that crosses borders, cultures, and generations. No one expected that it would be precisely in this segment that a statement would trigger layered reactions, collective emotions, and a rereading of who has truly become the strongest symbol in the global K-pop narrative today. When rookie group TWS and J from ENHYPEN were asked to name the artist they felt best represented universal language in music, their answer sounded almost too safe, too honest, and too obvious. BTS. The name was spoken without hesitation, without sensational embellishment, and without any attempt to provoke controversy. Yet that was exactly where the paradox lay. The calmer and more straightforward the statement was, the greater the echo it produced. Within minutes of the segment being broadcast, video clips, transcripts, and quotations of J's words spread across social media platforms, especially X, and ignited one recurring question in countless variations. Is this really about BTS as a group, or about a single figure who, in the public's mind, has become the most easily recognizable face of that universal language? A member of TWS, in his statement, spoke with deep respect and historical awareness. He mentioned BTS Sunbeam as artists whose music has touched the hearts of so many people around the world. He acknowledged that because of BTS, overseas fans opened their hearts to K-pop, and within that wave new generation groups, including TWS themselves, were able to receive global love. This statement, in both structure and content, was a classic acknowledgement from juniors to seniors. However, when J from ENHYPEN continued with his personal experience, the tone of the conversation shifted subtly yet significantly. J did not speak only about influence. He spoke about a phenomenon, about how, since he was still a trainee, he had seen so many fans learn the Korean language just to understand BTS's song lyrics. That sentence, even though it ended with the conclusion that BTS are the artists who most represent universal language, opened a much wider space for interpretation. Because the public, especially ARMY and industry observers, know that the phenomenon of learning Korean because of BTS is often associated with one particular figure. The figure whose voice most frequently goes viral, whose face most often appears in global algorithms, and whose performances are most easily translated across cultures. This is where the name Jungkook began to surface, not from J's mouth, but from the collective consciousness of fans. The reaction on X came like a massive wave that could not be contained. Hashtags, quotes, and comments flooded timelines. Many ARMY celebrated the moment as a renewed acknowledgement of the legendary phrase, BTS paved the way. Large fan accounts wrote proudly that BTS's impact is indeed unmatched. But among the thousands of posts, an interesting pattern emerged. Every time J mentioned fans learning Korean because of BTS, the replies beneath it were filled instead with clips of Jungkook singing, performing on international stages, or speaking in global interviews. No one explicitly denied that BTS was the subject. Yet the public, in its own way, began to center its emotions and imagination on a single figure. This is where the big question took shape. If BTS is the universal language, why is the face that most often appears in the public's mind Jungkook? Is this merely algorithmic bias, or a reflection of how the global industry works, which tends to reduce the complexity of a group into a single, most easily recognizable symbol? This question became even more relevant given the timing. BTS, as a group, is currently absent from full activities due to preparations for their comeback in March 2026. Yet even in their absence, their name continued to dominate this year's Golden Disc Awards. More than that, Jungkook, despite not being physically present, remained alive in public discourse as the emotional representation of BTS's influence. For some fans, this phenomenon is nothing new. Jungkook has long been positioned unofficially as a bridge between BTS and a broader global audience. He is often referred to as a gateway for new listeners, the figure who draws in casual audiences and gradually leads them to discover BTS as a whole. However, for other fans, especially those who strongly emphasize BTS's collective identity, this kind of narrative feels dangerous. They worry that excessive focus on one member could obscure the collective work, long history, and group dynamics that form the foundation of BTS's success. It is this tension that makes ENHYPEN's words feel far larger than a simple answer in an awards segment. They became a mirror reflecting how the public reads K-pop today, a way in which recognition of a group can shift into a discussion about an individual, a way in which universal language is no longer just about music, but about the figure perceived as capable of representing global emotion, and a way in which new generation idols like J and TWS unknowingly reinforce narratives that have long existed in fans' minds. The Golden Disc Awards 2026, which should have been remembered as a celebration of 40 years of the Korean music industry, will now also be remembered as the moment when one simple sentence sparked a much deeper debate. A debate about representation, symbolism, and how the global public interprets BTS in an era when they are not even present on stage. Is this a sign that BTS have moved beyond group status and transformed into a concept? Or is it a signal that Jungkook, in the global imagination, has become the strongest personification of what is called universal language? These questions have no single answer, and perhaps were never meant to be answered definitively. But one thing is certain: ENHYPEN's words at the Golden Disc Awards have opened a door to a discussion that cannot be closed again. And behind that door, the public is beginning to realize that when the name BTS is spoken, the world no longer hears just one voice. They hear harmony, but they also search for the melody they know best. And it is there, without ever being asked, that the name Jungkook continues to appear, a shadow that follows every acknowledgement of BTS as the language that unites the world. The Universal Language segment at the Golden Disc Awards was essentially designed as a space for academic and symbolic reflection. Music was positioned as a cross-cultural medium, a non-verbal communication system capable of reaching anyone, anywhere. However, when BTS was named as the primary representative of this concept, the meaning of language itself shifted. It was no longer merely a musical metaphor, but a global identity. And every global identity in the history of popular culture almost always requires a face. This is where the dynamics began to shift. Fans, observers, and even international media no longer discuss BTS solely as a collective entity, but started asking, who most represents that language when it is translated into visuals, sound, and emotion? The answers that appeared on timelines were not the result of any formal agreement, but of emotional consensus. An emotional consensus is rarely shaped by logic alone. Jay's statement about fans learning the Korean language became a turning point in the discussion. Learning a language is not merely consuming music. It is commitment, active effort, and a form of deep cultural engagement. In the history of K-pop, this phenomenon had existed before, but never on a scale as large as during the BTS era. And within popular narratives, the process of learning Korean has often been associated with a figure perceived as the most accessible to global audiences. A figure whose vocals are often considered the most universal, whose articulation is the clearest, and whose performances are the easiest to accept across cultures. This is where Jungkook once again emerged, not as an official claim but as a collective reflection. Many international fans openly acknowledge that their initial interest in BTS began with Jungkook, before eventually getting to know and love the entire group. This pattern has repeated so frequently that it has become something of a modern myth within the fandom. When Jay mentioned the phenomenon of learning Korean, this collective memory was reactivated, as if the public were filling in a gap that was never explicitly stated. However, it is important to note that this reading was not received uniformly. On the other side of the fandom spectrum, unease emerged. Some fans questioned why every acknowledgement of BTS always seemed to end with the highlighting of a single member. They reminded others that BTS was built on collective work, a narrative of 7 individuals with complementary roles. From this perspective, centering the idea of universal language on one figure is seen as a dangerous simplification of BTS's long history. This tension was clearly visible in online conversations. On one side, there were tweets celebrating Jungkook as a global symbol, calling him the face that made the world want to listen to K-pop. On the other side, there were tweets asserting that BTS's universal language was born from RM's lyrics, Jimin's vocal emotion, V's vocal color, the rap foundations of Suga and J-Hope, and the collective harmony that cannot be reduced to a single name. These two camps do not cancel each other out, but coexist in a tension that continues to repeat itself. Interestingly, this debate actually reinforced one thing. BTS's position as the center of global discussion remains unshaken. Even in their physical absence, the name BTS continues to be the axis. The Golden Disc Awards 2026 became proof that BTS have moved beyond the phase of being merely an active group and entered symbolic territory. They are no longer judged only by their latest releases, but by a historical and cultural impact that continues to resonate. For new generation idols such as TWS and ENHYPEN, this acknowledgement also carries significant implications. By naming BTS as a universal language, they implicitly acknowledge that the global path they walk today was opened by a previous generation. Yet at the same time, they also inherit the complexity of that narrative. Every word they utter about BTS will inevitably be read in layers, analyzed, and interpreted through a fandom lens that is highly conscious of symbols and representation. This is where the biggest surprise of this moment begins to appear. Not in what Jay said, but in how the public responded to it. The statement became something of a Rorschach test for the fandom. What people saw in it often reflected their own emotional positions more than the speaker's intent. For some, it was a pure acknowledgement of BTS. For others, it was an indirect validation of Jungkook as a global figure. And for the industry, it served as a reminder that meaning no longer fully resides in the hands of artists or event organizers, but in the hands of the public that interprets it. Universal language, in this context, is no longer only about music that can be understood without translation. It becomes a symbolic language about who is perceived to represent K-pop in the eyes of the world. And symbolic language always works selectively. It filters, highlights, and sometimes simplifies. That is why, even though BTS is explicitly mentioned, discussions about Jungkook continue to emerge as an inseparable shadow. As the debate began to shift from what was said to what was felt, it became clear that Jay and ENHYPEN's words had moved far beyond their original function as an answer in an awards show. They transformed into a mirror reflecting collective unease, hopes, and even hidden fears within the global fandom. The question BTS or Jungkook no longer stood as a simple opposition, but as a marker that K-pop has now entered a phase where meaning is shaped by resonance, not merely by official statements. BTS, as a group, has reached a rare point in the history of popular music. They no longer need to be present to remain relevant. Their absence from the Golden Disc Awards stage due to comeback preparations only reinforced that status. The name BTS continued to be mentioned, referenced, and used as a standard. Yet behind that standard, the global public showed a natural tendency to seek a figure they could hold onto emotionally. This is where Jungkook continues to emerge, not because he is being explicitly promoted, but because he has long lived in the global imagination as the most easily recognizable face of the BTS phenomenon. For the industry, this phenomenon is not merely a fandom issue, but an important signal. It shows how a collective narrative can evolve into a symbolic narrative centered on an individual, even when the official context is a group. This is not new in the history of popular culture, but in BTS's case, the complexity is far greater because their foundation was built on solidarity and a strong collective identity. Every attempt to read them individually inevitably clashes with the long-held fandom value of 7 or nothing. Yet it is precisely at this point of collision that the future of global K-pop begins to take shape. A new generation of idols is growing up with BTS as a historical reference, not merely as seniors. They know a world where K-pop is already globally accepted, where learning Korean is no longer strange, and where one group can change the direction of an entire industry. When they speak about BTS, they speak about foundations, but the public, living in a visual and algorithm-driven culture, often grasps those foundations through a single emotional entry point. ENHYPEN's words, when reread calmly, never intended to separate BTS from their collective identity. He mentioned BTS as a whole with respect and historical awareness. However, the power of a statement in the digital era is no longer determined by intention, but by echo. And that echo, in this case, carried the name Jungkook to the surface as a symbol that repeatedly appears in the conversation. Is this fair? That question continues to hang in the air. For some, it is a natural consequence of global popularity. For others, it is a dangerous reduction. But perhaps the more important question is not about fairness but about reality. The reality that BTS now exists on two levels at once, as a legendary group that shaped an era, and as a collection of individuals, each with a different kind of global resonance. The Golden Disc Awards 2026 unintentionally captured this moment of transition with remarkable clarity. On one hand, it reaffirmed BTS's position as the universal language of music. On the other, it opened space for discussion about how that language is translated by the public. And in that translation, the name Jungkook appeared not as a replacement for BTS, but as one of the ways the world understands them. For ARMY, this moment can be read as both a reminder and a challenge. A reminder that BTS's influence remains alive even in absence, and a challenge to continue maintaining a balance between celebrating individuals and honoring the collective. For the industry, this is a signal that the next era of global K-pop will be increasingly complex, increasingly symbolic, and increasingly dependent on how the public constructs meaning.